great to have you with us. It's great to have Craig and Connie with us. So today's lesson is parenting the prodigal child. And it's just continuing our series of Bible stories your children and you need to know very well. But today we're going to take a little different tact on it because so often we look at the son and what the son did and what the son came back to and etc. But today I want to go back a little further in that boy's life, and I want to talk about parenting a child to keep them in the Lord. But it's interesting because I had something very unusual happen this week, and I don't remember what day Carl and I were together, I think Wednesday morning. But anyway, I get a phone call, and a man said, is this Church of Christ? Yes, it is. And he goes, I'm at a gas station, and on top of one of the trash cans was this Bible, or one just like it. I'm thinking, we haven't had these Bibles in the pews for years. It's been about 10 years since there's a few laying around, but not many. And he said, I opened it up, and the cover was a stamp that said Freeport Church of Christ and a phone number. Is that you? It is. And he said, why would anybody put one? He said, I guess they were superstitious and didn't throw it in the trash can. They left it on the trash can. And I'm trying to think, he says, do you want it back? I said, well, sure. If you want to bring it back, bring it to us, and you can put it in the mail slot or whatever. And he goes, well, I said, would you like the Bible? Because we'd love you to have it if you want it. Oh, can I? Yes. And he said, it's interesting. Here's the interesting part about it. He said, I grew up going to church, but I haven't done anything in years. And he said, and I was just this week praying that God would show me what I need to do to get back in his favor. And I'm like, okay, it gives me a little bit of chill. Because nobody got this Bible from us in the last 5-10 years. And he said, does God ever work that way? And I said, when a person prays God, show them the way, God will make a door available. Now I said, now you have to walk through that door now. But he gave you the first step. So hopefully he's thinking about coming and doing a Bible study Wednesday morning. I said 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You make the call, I'll be there. So, yes, sir. Oh, my goodness. Well, now I know the Raucusant that... No, but okay, so I will say again, God works in crazy ways. Tony forgot it where he was cleaning, and somebody who needed that Bible found it. I'll give you another one, Tony. But, I was going to buy you a really nice leather bound. You getting the paperback now, brother. No. But so as we start today, we're looking at foundational teaching. Twice this week I've had someone approach me with the excuse, I guess, I grew up in the church, but. And in both cases they were saying, I'd like to come back to the church. So today we're looking at parenting a prodigal child. One of the greatest challenges we as Christians have, and one of the greatest responsibilities we have, is taking the children God gives us, whether they are ours by birth, ours by adoption, ours by grandparenting, ours by church family. One of the greatest challenges we have, and one of the greatest gifts we've been given, is a child to mold in the image of God. Bob talked a lot about the image of Christ today, and to someone in that, there needs to be some foundational teaching done in the home, or because we say, well, when they depart from us, they'll come back maybe. The thing is, if they have no foundation on which their faith is built, they have nothing to come back to. If this was a way stop once a month, they're not going to come back here. So the body of Christ needs to lay a foundation. It's a scary task. Been there, done that. And you have a struggle and you worry so much. And the consequences of us not teaching don't just last 80 years of, maybe their life. The consequences are eternal. And they are our responsibility. And I hate to scare you, parents, but Just like as an elder, I face a tougher judgment. I believe the first question God will ask is, why didn't you if you have not raised your children in the Lord? Now, I'm not saying they won't depart when they get older. It happens. And you can sometimes do everything I'm preaching half my sermon here in the intro. You can teach everything possible and do everything right within your ability, and a child may choose to go a different direction. Not on you. But it is on us if we did not lay a foundation for them to return to. So we are to, Ephesians 6:4, bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. So as a rule, Proverbs 22:6 says, if you raise them right, they'll do right. But it's a rule of thumb, because we are made as free will beings. So what do you do when a child decides to go a different pattern? So today we're going to look at this from the aspect of the father. Lessons we can learn about parenting from this father. Certainly, the ideal is for our children to become faithful Christians and to be the next generation of leaders in God's church. That's what we want. But the reality is they grow up, they go away, and it's a painful experience, and one we've all seen. You wrestle with fears about what's going to happen. You wrestle about fears about what they're going to do with their human lives, much less their spiritual lives in today's world. So while we understand that this parable was not initially a lesson about parenting, it really was, and we'll see this, a lesson about God and his love for us. But we're going to look at it from a little different angle. So let's start with the reading so we can remember the parable, and then we'll move forward.
Good morning. With this being our family and Jeff's talking about foundational teachings, make sure you always get the results before you agree to volunteering to help out. It's quite a bit today.
It's a volunteer thing.
This morning I'll be reading from Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32, and this will be from the New American Standard Version. And he said, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that is coming to me. And so he divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey to a distant country, and there he squandered his estate in wild living. Now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began doing without. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he longed to have his fill of the carob pods that the pigs were eating, and no one was giving him anything. But when he came to his senses, he said, How many of my father's hired laborers have more than enough bread, but I am dying here from hunger? I will set out and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired laborers. So he set out and came to his father. But when he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and bring the fattened calf, slaughter it, and let's eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to live life again. He was lost and has been found. And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things could be. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound. But he became angry and was not willing to go in, and his father came out and began pleading with him. But he answered and said to his father, Look, for so many years I have been serving you, and I have never neglected a command of yours. And yet you never gave me a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. but we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live, and was lost and has been found."
So, the story of the prodigal son is a direct lesson in forgiveness from God. I want you to notice the background on this. Jesus is often surrounded by the world, but he's also surrounded by Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, and, in other words, just sinners. And these people knew that they weren't righteous. The problem was the Pharisees and the scribes believed they were righteous. They had the answers. They knew. They couldn't understand why a teacher of God's law was allowing himself to be surrounded by people of the world. So, Jesus, we expect more of you. You say you're a teacher of the law. We expect more of you. We want more. So Jesus starts teaching these three parables, a lesson on forgiveness and understanding: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. And with these three lessons, Jesus is teaching the power of God's love and forgiveness to us, his people. The Father in this story is God. He's a representative picture of God the Father, the God whom we worship, and also the God we reject when we're unfaithful. The prodigal son, well, he's tax collectors. He's sinners. He's us. He's us. And then the third one, the older brother, he's the scribes and the Pharisees, because as he in the story is angry because the father rejoices at the return of his brother, he can't see that the story is not about his return. The story is about forgiveness, and he should love his brother and be happy his brother's return. Sometimes, if I were to call you a scribe or a Pharisee and you know the Bible, it'd be an insult, wouldn't it? You wouldn't like that at all. And yet, because of the neighborhood we're in at times, and because of the way the world has gone, people drift in and usually drift back out again, but they may have drug problems. They may have other issues. In fact, Wednesday night we had a young man came to Bible study. He had been smoking. The smell of marijuana was strong on him. But yet, and in fact, I went to supper and I said, "I'm still smelling it on my clothes." Well, I smelled it on my clothes because I hugged him and said I was glad he was here. See, the church I've said this before, is my mother, and I think I heard this from Craig Suby the first time. The church is not an aquarium. How'd that go, Craig? Do you remember? We're supposed to be we are supposed to be fishers of men, not keepers of an aquarium. The church can be an aquarium, but we are here to be fishing for men. And so when someone comes in, we can't be like the scribe and Pharisee and say, "You sit way back over in that corner because," well, you can earn your way up to, Daryl's so good. He's earned the front section, striving to get on the front pew right in front of me. We can't do that. In fact, good old Daryl should get up and give his seat if somebody wants to sit up that close that is coming to the Lord, because we are here for that stranger. And so, thirdly, we will look at the lessons we can learn from this. First, again, God's love and forgiveness. Even though we can pull away, God stands ready, begging us to come back to him. We look at ourselves in relation to sin, and when we realize that we've pulled away from God sometimes, now there can be the momentary lapse, but sometimes we have to just hit bottom. And so side lesson number one, parents, sometimes you have to cut the cord and let them hit the bottom, because there are times that they will not respond to your view of love and forgiveness. It has to be hard sometimes. It has to be hard. And so we have to wait for them to come to their senses and come back. And then there's our own need for forgiveness. When we come back to God, or when we come back to God, we want him to forgive us and to show us love. When someone else comes back to God, I don't care what your earthly viewpoint of their sin is. They deserve your love and forgiveness, because God forgives the truly repentant heart. And so you have no right to judge them. Let's say that one again. We have no right to judge another person's sins. You get rid of your own first and let them deal with God for theirs. So Jesus' point is to teach us about this forgiveness and forgiving. I mean, because God is the Father in this story, we look to him and we look to see how he behaved. The son left. I'm sure the son didn't walk up and say, you know what, I've been thinking about my inheritance. All right, here's a check, go. That's not what happened. I'm sure this father, had it been a real life story, the father would have tried to talk him out of it. The father would have been saying, don't go. This is a mistake. Why don't you stay and work a little while longer? I'll change your duty. But he doesn't. He leaves anyway. So the father allows him to leave and allows him to leave with love. Because he's not going to come back if he doesn't feel love. Know that there's a safe space. Your children are not going to turn to you if they think you are not a safe space in their life. You have to be willing to listen. And by the way, on the back of the bulletin today, there are 6 tips to help you working with children. There's many more that I could have, but I only got so much space, and making the font small enough, we can still read it and get it on the page. But one of those things is to, when they come to you and saying, I've messed up, is not to jump all over them. It's to reward them for realizing that they've messed up. So anyway, let's look at some of the relationship things here. First, he insisted on leaving even though there was a strong foundation of family in that family. Now, we're not told anything about his upbringing. Again, it's a parable, and Jesus made it condensed. But you would assume from the way the father acts that there has been the appropriate upbringing here. And remember, with his father, he's representative of our God. And so who would dare cast guilt on God saying he didn't raise his children right? God gives us every opportunity to learn right from wrong. Our God is amazing. And just as God, and I really believe this, just as God manipulated Tony to leave a Bible for someone searching, God can use us and teach us, but only if we're willing to open our eyes and look. We have so many opportunities to do good. Open your eyes and look. So, listen, parents, I'm sorry to say this, but you can do everything perfect by the book. If you're as old as us, you'd say by Dr. Spock's book. But anyway, I know everybody hates Dr. Spock if you're a Christian. But anyway, you can do everything by the book correct to raise your children, and they could still choose to do wrong. And that's not your fault at that point. But don't, parents, especially you young parents, don't kid yourselves and say, I did everything right when you didn't try. If you substitute a television as a parent, that's not trying. So anyway, let's keep going. Consider, let's look at Israel. And part of this is Jesus is looking at Israel. Remember, Jesus went on a mountaintop and cried over Israel. Why? Because, as God describes so many times, they were adulterers. They adulterated his relationship with them. And so even though God raised them with the perfection of his love and his rules and his life, continually they were rebellious. Hosea 11, 1-4. They were rebellious against God. So what more could God have done in raising Israel than he did? Nothing. Yet they still chose a different path. And so we can deal with guilt. I would just say this, parents, never underestimate the power of your sin outweighing the words from your mouth. If you have sin in your life and yet you're speaking godly words to your children, they see the sin more than they hear the words. We all do that, don't we? If you've got a boss, let's put this in work terms. You've got a boss who says all the right corporate things, right? But never abides by them, you have zero respect. I had a boss like that. Oh, when the big boys were around, he was always the perfect leader. When they were gone, he was a jerk. He was hard to work for. He was an egotist, and I couldn't hardly stand it. That's when you are acting different than you're saying, your kids will not hardly stand it, and they will remember it. So, Colossians 4:5 says, while you have the opportunity, redeem your time. Because I thought Ben's growing up was the longest stretch of time I'd ever seen some days. And yet, these guys, as Bob mentioned Wednesday night, I think it was, these guys that I still tend to call the young men are grown, almost middle-aged men now. That time goes by so fast. So parents, don't think you've got plenty of time. And I'll throw this in too, grandparents, you are not too late to set the right example either, even to your grown kids. Be the one that they can turn to with their problems. Be the one that they'll come to and say, help me. Now, first word out of my mouth is, what did mom or dad say? But knowing that, still, I want to be the one they turn to, even when I tell them, you're in the wrong here. In fact, I always say, you're in the wrong. Mom and dad are always right till proven wrong. But anyway, so as long as you have opportunity, redeem the time. So sometimes we blame ourselves. We beat ourselves up for it. We even hold back in our service to God. Ezekiel made it very clear that a righteous father can have an unrighteous son. Last week's lesson, we talked that the high priest's 2 sons, remember them? How horrid they were? Well, they were raised in God's tabernacle. They knew what was expected, and yet they still came out as bad eggs, bad seed, whatever. So sometimes we think we need to prevent our children from coming into the consequences of their actions. You hear about it all the time. Parents that bail their children out and bail their children out and bail their you're not helping. You're not helping. Many years ago, one of the teens was asked, and I think the teen's here, but I'm not going to embarrass her. But many years ago, the teens were asked, who would you call if you got in trouble and arrested in the middle of the night? And somebody said, I'm calling Jeff. Somebody else said, I'm not calling Jeff. I don't want. Well, good. I love you enough to come, and I love you enough to tell you were wrong. Many years ago, Ben went to, we got called into a conference. Ben, I think, was 4th or 5th grade. And it was a young teacher, 1st or 2nd year teacher, and Allison was a well-seasoned teacher at the point. And so we sit down with this teacher, and she starts out making all these excuses for Ben's behavior and saying, well, and kind of like as if we were already jumping on her. Finally, I said, stop. You are an adult. He is a child. You are right until you are proven wrong. So we support you, and we will handle this problem. And we mostly did handle the problem. He never did his homework. No, me either. So anyway, we need to be that person. We want to say too easy, my child wouldn't do that. They're an angel. And everyone else is looking at your child going, Recognize your faults and your shortcomings and your weaknesses of your children and your grandchildren and even each other to help us overcome those. Solomon basically told one of his son, if you get in a mess, figure your way out of it. Deliver yourself. In fact, isn't that why we read, work on your own salvation diligently? So anyway, make it possible for your child, if they do leave God, to come home again. We can, physically, verbally, whatever, make our children think they could never come home. If God thought that way, I wouldn't be here today. I'd just sit at home on the couch and watch a little TV, because there'd be no hope for me or anybody else here. But God says, boy, you were wrong, come home. I always remember Jesus and the woman caught in the very act of adultery. Go and sin no more. He didn't hit her with one rock and say, just to teach you your lesson. He said, where are they who were going to stone you? They've all left. They didn't condemn me, neither do I. Go and sin no more. See, you can correct behavior without condemnation, right? A condemned house is not one that you can fix up again. It's getting torn down. Don't condemn your children. Do a little home repair if you have to. And sometimes home repair can be painful. I'm not saying no. So the father never lost hope. In my mind, I see the father out on that road every single morning looking, every day at lunchtime looking, every night and evening looking, waiting for his son, which is why he saw him from afar off, hoping, praying, working towards his son coming back again. But your ability to keep them from going astray, from being prodigal, is to work on it ahead of time before they do. Jesus said to Peter, because he knew Peter was going to deny him, Jesus said, this is what you need to do to come back, Luke 22. Even if they don't act like it, they never forget what you taught them. It's so funny. You watch kids, especially middle school, high school, they're too cool for all this, you know. And they'll sit there and they'll be looking down, or they'll, you know, you think they're sleeping, whatever. And then afterwards, they will say something about your sermon. And you went, oh, you really were listening. You know, you really did get it. They hear you, parents. They just don't want to admit it. But if you don't instill the right biblical formula, they won't know how to fix their problem. And like the father of the prodigal son, like God does, never lose hope. So what's the first thing we should do? Teach them. What's next? Pray for them. Maybe those are interchangeable. Teach them, pray for them. And when they leave, keep praying for them. Ben and Casey, they're adults. I pray for them all the time. They're both in jobs that can be stressful and hard. I pray for them all the time. I pray for my grandkids when they're in school. I pray for your kids on a regular basis. Pray for them. Don't give up hope no matter what's going on. And when you have opportunity, convey that hope to your children. So, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this story, but so before I met the incredible woman who is now the preacher's wife, I was engaged to a young lady at Lipscomb. And it was not good. And it didn't work, and I called it off. And after that was over, my dad told me, he says, you don't know how many nights I would lay on the floor, outstretched, begging God to open your eyes that this was not a relationship you should be in. That had so much impact on me. Not just the fact that my father would pray for me, the fact that he made a point that he would lay proned out before God. When I was 10 years old, my dad said a bad word. Only bad word I ever heard him say until he got Alzheimer's. And he immediately asked me to pray for his forgiveness with him. Asked me to lead the prayer, 10-year-old, 12-year-old boy, whatever it was. See, when you convey hope to your children, that the fact that you love them, that you're praying for them, they will never forget that image. Because that's an image of us declaring that we're not capable, we're not strong enough, that we need God to handle it for us. So when you do that, you do a better job, and you give them something. Because true repentance can be difficult. Have you ever had to admit to people that you had sinned? Have you ever had to, or the mile-long walk of shame in a 20-foot auditorium? That can be hard to come forward and confess in front of everyone what you've done. I think one of the biggest mistakes we're making in our generation is people have quit coming forward publicly. Because that is only then can your friends and family start helping you. Because they don't know otherwise. And when we keep all these sins secret, I'm not really sure how repentant we are. I'm not saying you're not. But I am saying that can be an easy, dangerous habit to get into, to dealing with everything in your mind by yourself. So God deals with us. We wander away. He reaffirms us. He brings us back. We know God is always standing there, waiting for us to come back. And so when your child comes back, rejoice with them. I'm not saying there doesn't have to be some corrective measures taken. There does. Things have to change. But rejoice when they come back and tell them, I'm so happy you took this step. Let them know that this was important. The father was so compassionate. He ran to him. He enveloped him in a hug. He kissed him. He put the ring back on his finger. And now the ring is very important here. And the robes. Because they say, you are my son. You're in this family. The father is declaring, you never left the family. You're still here. And so he lifted up his son when the son humbled himself and came back to repent. And then he throws the party. Now, the party we're going to today, some of us, it is not because Steve and Diane have repented. It's because they're old. But anyway, I mean married for a long time. But, throw a celebration. The father threw a celebration, music, dancing, killed the fatted calf to celebrate that the son had returned. Too often, we show contempt when our child comes home. We show anger, disappointment. Show the celebration of the return and then teach them what has to change. So, forgive them, love them. But how would you truly react if a child of yours walked in today and said, I have been wrong? Well, I just say this. Go look in the mirror and say, I have been perfect for every year of my life. Dare you. I dare you to go in a room alone and look in the mirror and say that. Because none of us are without sin. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And we need to remember that. So, although I said don't blame yourself if they walk away when you've done everything right, understand much of the responsibility was yours for how you raised them. And so I know if you're old like us and they're grown and all that, well, the days are past for a lot of teaching. You can still model the right relationships, right family. But for you younger parents, it is not too late to change what you're doing now, right now, and start raising them as God has raised you. The prodigal son. It's difficult parenting a prodigal child. And it hurts when we see their weakness. And it hurts when we can't seem to find the answers to change them right away. Well, God says the same thing about us every day. It hurts when they won't listen to reason. It hurts when I try to send them something that shows them a little lesson, reminds them that they've done wrong. So, I'll give you a little confession here real quick. A couple weeks ago, talking with Bruce and then talking with some others, I was talking about how difficult it is in Freeport to get someone to listen to God's Word. How our own numbers have gone down. How it's so hard to get a Bible study. And I don't think anybody cares, so I've just got to do the best with the family here we have and try to keep together what we have. And then all of a sudden, 2 people come in a week saying, I want to learn. I don't know how much God was influencing them saying that, but I know God was slapping me in the face for saying there was no hope anymore. God was reminding me, never, ever give up. Whether it's parenting, whether it's personal evangelism, whether it's friendship evangelism, never, ever give up on anyone. Because God has never given up on you. If we can help you in your walk with the Lord today, we offer a chance now to come while together we stand and while we sing.